Good evening, all. Welcome to today's Cancer Healing Journey Talks. Myself, Annie Jose from Community Outreach Team Zenonco.io and Love Heals Cancer. Cancer Healing Journey Talks helps cancer survivors and caregivers to share their journey with vast number of survivors and caregivers who have traveled or been traveling through this journey. This can inspire and motivate them for their faster recovery as well. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Boyd Dunleavy. He's a twice blood cancer survivor. Welcome to for today's session, Boyd. Over to you. Can you please start with your introduction?
Hi, and greetings from Canada. So in 2011 of July, I have a wife and we had 3 young kids, and I wasn't feeling well and thought I had the flu or a cold or a cough. And my wife said, you should probably go to the doctor because we were going to go out of town. And at that time, we were in Ontario. So we're near Toronto, near Detroit, kind of central Canada. And to my absolute shock and dismay, our family doctor called and said that I had acute myeloid leukemia. So we didn't know how serious it was, but we knew that it was very serious. And they admitted me to the hospital that day, and I didn't leave the hospital for a month. And our children were very young. Our son was 6, our second son was 2, and our daughter was like 4 months old. And so it was it's hard to look back on, but it's what it was. And so many people in our community were praying and people were encouraging. And I went through 1, 2, 3 rounds of chemotherapy. And in September of 2011, it took them 3 months to get the subcategory of blood cancer. So anybody that's been through cancer knows a little bit about cancer. There's a whole bunch of different categories and stuff, and they told me it was AML 6-9, acute myeloid leukemia 6-9, and the doctor looked at me with his I'm not laughing, it was like so serious. He's like, this is the worst type of blood cancer I've personally seen. He had never seen it before. He needed to go and look in his journal of medicine, and they said I probably wouldn't live the year without a life-saving stem cell transplant. And that was shocking and disappointing. And I think I laughed and I cried, and I don't remember exactly, but I think I said something along the lines of I've got a guy, and I'm referring to Jesus. We're Christians, and believing that God could heal me from this. And it was a very interesting time because so many people in the community rallied, and they did a fundraiser for our family to try and find a stem cell donor. And we did they did a fundraiser, and so we did this big thing, and people that was the thing. So to be a match for a stem cell donor, what they do, at least in Canada and the US, is they send you a swab kit in the mail. So you do a swab inside your mouth, and then you put it back in, and then they send the kit off. But for somebody to actually be a stem cell donor, it's like a 1 in a million thing. There's not a lot of, statistically, it's very difficult. And so anyways, we took the kids to Disney because, they didn't think I was going to live the year. And then late November, December of 2011, a friend took me and another gentleman who was sick to Israel. That was amazing. That was so cool. I think that was one of my favorite things. And I come home from that and I'm hopeful, and isn't everything great? And I remember in February of 2012, I wasn't feeling 100%, but I went to the cancer clinic, and I don't know if you have this in India, but at the cancer, you can ring the bell that you're in remission. Do you guys have that or no? but you get the idea, right? So yay, we're in remission, ring the bell, everything's great. And then like 2 weeks later, we found out that my cancer had relapsed. And so that was absolutely horrible. I mean, oh, I think I cried for like 3 days and thought I was done for. And I really felt like God was just saying to me, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Stop lying there. Just believe for a miracle. I mean, other people were believing for a miracle, and I needed to believe for that too. And I remember there was a man in the bed beside me who was dying. He had tubes coming out of his stomach, and um, his sister-in-law, her name was Karen, she came in from out of town and she prayed for him. And I remember praying for him and believing for this guy. I mean, he was dying. His family said goodbye to him. And then he improved so much, he went home for home care on the Friday. Like he went from being in a bed dying to improving. And that just really touched me deeply. And about 8 days later, no, for the next 8 days, I started hiccuping uncontrollably. My stomach was swollen out to here. It was horrible. I was very, very ill. I was dying, and God intervened. I don't want to get too much into it, but basically, I saw Jesus and had a vision of it. And 2 days later, the cancer left my body out of my mouth. I just vomited across the room, and that was February of 2012, and it
Right.
was quite a profound moment because the doctors did a biopsy after that. The bone marrow biopsies are the only way that they can determine if your cancer's in remission or not. That is really painful. They go through your hip, and they don't just put a needle in because they have to screw into the hip to draw the marrow out to see if the marrow has cancer in it or not. And God delivered me of cancer twice and 8 months. And so you have to be in remission to be able to do the stem cell transplant. Oh, and this is the thing too. We found out that they had a stem cell donor, but then because of clerical issues and mistakes that people made, my cancer relapsed because of the incompetence of somebody else. And so I think that was the most discouraging thing. But then here I am back in remission. And so where we were in London, Ontario, didn't do unrelated stem cell transplants. That was the thing. We knew it was from an anonymous donor. And so my wife actually Googled Juravinsky Hospital, which is in Hamilton, Ontario. It's about an hour and 45 minutes from where we lived, an hour and a half. And Juravinsky's cancer clinic is one of the top hospitals in the world. It was really quite amazing. And so we did more radiation, more chemotherapy. It prepped me for the stem cell transplant. And May 3rd, somewhere around there, of 2012, I had a stem cell transplant. That was the most horrific thing I've been through in my life. I was really, really, really sick, and I had a port in my neck, and I've had PICC lines in my arms, and they were drawing blood work, and they were doing all kinds of things. And it took close to a month for the marrow to. Oh, this is the thing. So they wipe out your bone marrow, they wipe out your stem cells, and they give you somebody else's marrow. And so it grafts into your body, and it's like it's not even like a new engine for a car. I don't even know what the right way to describe it is. And so, anyways, that was horrible. I mean, just really, really ill for about a month, and I came home from that. And I remember trying to have some spaghetti, and my face went numb. And because I had no immune system, I suffered a spinal cord injury in my neck and lower back. And it had nothing to do with the cancer. And then what we realized later was I couldn't walk straight, and really still can't walk straight. But during the first round of chemotherapy the summer before in 2011, suffered a brain injury, so sort of behind the ear, and that was just from a boatload of chemotherapy. And so the brain and spinal cord injury really was, um, it was just more bad news. And it was interesting because we didn't really discover it until the next summer because these other things were adding on top of what I was going through. And so, anyways, I was fitted for a scooter, which is not a wheelchair, it's not a walker, but it's like a riding thing. And I remember that. And that was late 2012. And I remember just being really sad and depressed for a long period of time, just thinking, I had come through cancer and now I'm going to spend the rest of my life in chronic pain. And I guess the other thing too that was kind of a miracle was I got a letter in the mail from the hospital asking me how the service was. Like, how's our service? Like a survey. I'm like, so I just filled it in. I said, this is the worst experience I've had in my life. My cancer relapsed because of somebody's incompetence. I suffered a brain and spinal cord injury during my treatments. And this is what you left me with. And I remember a gentleman, his name was Dr. Jabert. He called and said, I'm so sorry. This is horrible. This is not what we try to do. I mean, this isn't the service that we try to provide. And this was November of 2012. Oh, and I was on all kinds of anti-rejection pills. I was taking like 20 different pills a day, and fluconazole, and just pantoprazole. Like, your chin swells and your neck swells. And, some
Right.
people go through cancer and they lose weight. I gained like 35 pounds. Just my
Mm-hmm.
body was swollen. And so, anyways, I remember him apologizing, and I said to him, "Sir, I don't feel like it, but I choose to forgive you." And there was no shining light from heaven. There was no miracle, but within a few weeks of that, I was able to get off the majority of the medication I was on, which was really quite miraculous. And there were a lot of people crying, a lot of people believing that God would bring me through this. But spring of 2013, I remember going to the YMCA. You might have that in your country, right? It's a gym. People work out, they ride the bikes, they swim, they whatever. And a friend approached me and said that he wanted to run a marathon for me. I said, that sounds amazing, with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And so Team in Training is this organization in North America that they run marathons and they raise money for blood cancer, and they run for a cancer patient, or they do these amazing things. And so that was a life transforming moment in the summer of 2013. My friend and his son and me and my oldest boy, we went to Alaska, and this guy ran a marathon for me. And that was one of the most exciting things that I got to be a part of, because we were just in the car and we'd go from here to here and we'd watch him run past, and we'd go to the next spot. And so, anyways, I came home from that trip and I bought a pair of shoes and I started running, and running with nerve damage, running with nerve pain, running with a brain injury, I have balance issues. I'm not sure how or why, but I just was motivated and I started running. And so I got good advice. I started with doing a 5 kilometer race or a 10 kilometer race. And then I worked my way up to half marathons, which is 21 kilometers. And spring of 2014, I did a 30-kilometer road race. And no, that was the thing. This was in Hamilton, Ontario. And so it was like 2 years after my life-saving stem cell transplant, I ran this thing called Around the Bay, which was 30 kilometers, which just seemed like a massive distance. And I just thought, I don't want to run a marathon again. And like that summer, we went back to Chicago and I did a half marathon there. thought I never wanted to run a marathon. And I remember in the fall of 2014, I was dealing with a lot of depression and mental health issues and survivor's guilt. I lost friends to cancer, and it just was so difficult for me. And my wife said, "You know what? The Disney Marathon um, has spots open up." And so I'm like, "Oh." So she's like, "Why don't you go? Why don't you run a marathon? You're kind of crazy, so go run a marathon." And so that was January of 2015. Oh, and I called them up. I'm not shy, and so I called Disney and said, "Hey, I'm coming to run my first marathon. I'm a two-time blood cancer survivor. We went to Disney when I was dying of cancer, and here I'm coming to run your marathon 4 years later, or 3 years later, whatever it was." And they were shocked. And so I had the privilege of sharing on stage before like 20,000 people. And that was like, wow, this is great. But then I had to run the marathon. And so, oh, what can I tell you? Oh, a friend in Ontario happened to be at Disney at the same time as us. He happened to be running the marathon. And Disney is so huge, they have like 28 hotels. So it's not like one Disney hotel, there's 28. And his name was Walter. He said, "Boyd, I'm running the marathon tomorrow. Do you want me to help you run it?" And I was like, wow. Because and he was in the same hotel as us. That was the weird part. It was just the randomness of, it's the size of a small city, right? Disney is so huge. There's like 28 hotels and 4 parks, and he happened to be at my hotel. And so we ran the Disney Marathon. It was amazing. I remember it's 42 kilometers. Marathon is 42.2 kilometers. It's 26.2 miles. It's a huge distance. And I remember coming through the 4 parks, and the one park is called Epcot, has the big ball, and we were coming into it. And he's like, "Boyd, you're a marathoner." And I started crying. I was bawling actually. And I'm like, "Shut up. We're not even finished the race. We still had to go around the thing to finish the race." And so anyways, finished that, right? Man, that was huge because, oh, that was the thing. I shared on stage for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society for team and training. And so they don't really have a lot of people that had blood cancer become runners. It's normally they run in memory of somebody that passed away. They run for somebody who's sick. They don't have the guy have cancer and then run. I mean, it's just, they'd like it, but a lot of people don't ever do this. And so anyways, I remember thinking, I don't want to run another marathon, or if I could run another marathon, the only one I would want to do is the Boston Marathon. But Boston is such a difficult race to qualify for. I mean, it attracts the best runners in the world. And so, the time that I had for my marathon wasn't that great, because I mean, it was my first marathon. But this took 8 months of inquiries and asking them questions and trying different ways to get in, like applying with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and having them turn it down in the local chapter. I'm like, this is just crazy. And I remember it was around October 10th. It was like the last day that I could apply. And I just remember God just sort of saying to me, "Send in your information and tell them this is your finishing time for your Disney Marathon, and let somebody else decide." And that was a really good learning lesson for me, because I was around very, very negative, critical people that were like, "You'll never get into Boston. You'll never get into Boston. You'll never get into Boston." And turns out they were wrong. But I had to advocate for a long time. And it wasn't, oh, that was the thing too. Yeah, you won't get into Boston. I'm like, "I got a guy." He's like, "Who?" I said, "The Lord Jesus." And he's like, "Oh, you're crazy." But anyways, so I got into Boston, and the people that were influencing or part of my life at that time were so critical and negative that I didn't go to Boston with them. I just avoided them. And I actually found 4 Americans that that wanted to be there just to see me and support me. Oh, and this is the other thing. I missed the biggest part. So we found out in 2013 that the guy that donated his bone marrow or his stem cells was an American serviceman named Nathan Barnes. I'm like, what the world? So you have to live a year after your stem cell transplant to meet your donor, because most people die. They don't make the year. And so I made the year. And so we connected on Facebook, and I thought, well, when am I going to meet this guy? Oh, and he was in Japan. I should have taken notes, right? So he was in Japan when he saved my life. The US Navy paid to fly he was a naval serviceman. They paid to fly him from Japan to Washington, D.C., where they took his bone marrow and his stem cells and they put them in my body. And so that was in 2012. We found out in 2013, and he was overseas. Like, he was in Japan. He was deployed overseas, and we never met. And so I just started running marathons waiting to meet him. And so Boston, the first year, was an unbelievable experience. I mean, I think I met like 20 different people that were like, Boyd, your story is incredible. And I called the Boston Red Sox, which is their baseball team. And the coach happened to also be a blood cancer survivor and wanted to meet me. So we're talking on the field. And the whole thing was crazy. So ran 42 kilometers that day and thought, just once is enough. And I remember it was just so difficult getting in the first time. It was emotionally draining. And to get there and to do it, and to actually, I improved my time by like 25 minutes from my Disney marathon to Boston, which generally doesn't happen. And we had a lot of fun. That was the coolest thing, was I think just having fun with people and not being around negative nillies that's saying what you can't do. And so anyways, my wife said, you guys had a lot of fun, you should go back. So in 2017, I went back again. That year I had so Boston has this program called Athletes with Disabilities. It's a different name now. It's accommodating people that have disabilities. And so I ran Boston under that category. And so 2016, I ran it. 2017 was amazing. I had like a 25-minute improvement from the other one. And it's like the third place mobility impaired athlete and top Canadian. And I'm actually in their magazine and on their website. You can find my picture right there. But anyways, that was amazing. And then I went back in 2018, and that was a difficult race. I mean, it was 2 degrees Celsius. There was a 80-kilometer headwind the whole way. There was people collapsing on the course in front of us. 100 people were hospitalized. It was just a difficult thing. And so anyways, all that to say, by God's grace, I ran the Boston Marathon 3 times, but I also ran Chicago and New York, which was a lot of energy and a lot of fun. Oh, and I went back to Disney. And so anyways, I had run 7 marathons in 7 years since my life-saving stem cell transplant. And I'm like, when am I going to meet Nathan? When am I going to meet, that's the name, Nathan Martin. When am I going to meet Nathan, my stem cell donor? Because this guy has been deployed overseas. And so, it's not living the dream life. I mean, I had a ton of medical appointments every year. The one year I had close to 200 medical appointments. And so I'm an athlete with disabilities. I'm a disabled adult because of the cancer treatments, but I run. And so it's really kind of complicated, but these trips to Disney with the family, running marathons, they were like the highlights of the year, to not just be going to medical appointments. And so 2019 was when Nathan was moved from Japan. He had been overseas to Jacksonville, Florida, which is near Orlando. And so we set that up, and there's actually there's a video. It's an amazing moment. So I waited 7 years to meet Nathan, and we got to meet at Disney. He had never been to Disney. I took him on the Disney roller coaster. He had never been on a roller coaster or amusement park, so I took him on a roller coaster at Disney. We met. There's a video. It's like a total tearjerker. It's amazing. But then I ran a half marathon that weekend, and he was there to give me my medal at the finish line. and it was it was like unbelievable. It was an unbelievable moment. It was epic, and like we're hugging, and like it was trending on social media. There was like it was on television, and they spelled my name wrong and said I ran a marathon, but I digress. It was a special moment. And so anyways, that was 2 years ago in November. And then I thought life was gonna be amazing and we're gonna do all kinds of cool stuff, but I'm sure you guys are aware in India that this thing called COVID happened in 2020.
Right.
And so anyways, I guess the last part of my story is my wife asked me in the spring, did I want to move to the Maritimes? The Maritimes is Eastern Canada. It's on the seaboard. It's north of New York or Boston, east of Maine. And so we sold our home and we moved to the Maritimes in July. And so since moving here, I actually ran 2 marathons in the Maritimes. But the neatest thing was on Saturday, Nathan FaceTimed me, my stem cell donor, and he had just got married. And so I was so happy for that moment. I cried, and his wife's name's Kim, and they just took time out of their day to say hi and to show me, their wedding bands. And he was in his Navy sailor's outfit, and she was in a wedding dress, and she was beautiful. And so anyways, it's a long story. I digress. Life is beautiful. And so something that I shared during the Disney race when I met Nathan 2 years ago is never lose hope. And so the doctors said in 2011, I probably wouldn't live the year, or that I might live 5 years. And so this is year 10 and a half, I don't know. And I'm now a 9-time marathon runner. And so my message to you guys is to not lose hope. So thank you for allowing me to share.
It was such an inspiring story, Boyd. So I have only one question. So if you want to sum up your whole journey in one sentence, what would that be?
Never lose hope.
All right. Yeah.
Never lose
So-
hope. I saw people they just lost hope, and they passed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Boyd. Yeah, it was really inspiring.
Thank you.
And I'm pretty sure that this will inspire people out there who have traveled or who is currently traveling through cancer journey, and caregivers as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.